Hello and welcome back to On The Sidelines. On this episode, on the first episode of our new series, Throwback Thursday, we'll be looking back at the history of the Toronto Raptors and picking our all-time starting lineup, as well as three bench players from all eras of the Toronto Raptors history. And throughout this series, we'll be doing similar sort of structure with other teams, both Toronto and otherwise. So stay tuned for that as well. And joining me, of course, is Matthew Lee and Bruni. How are you, Matthew?
I'm doing good. How about you, Ben?
I'm all right. So I kind of explained the sort of basis of this video. We want to sort of explain the structure of the video, how we're going to sort of make our picks here.
Yes, so we're going to be doing five positions, of course, with point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center. And then we're going to follow it up with our three bench players. And actually, at the end, this is something that we saw yesterday online, where some people were giving their Mount Rushmore for the Raptors franchise. So at the end of the video, we're going to name our four best players once we name our starting lineup for the franchise. Yes, so we'll get started with point guard. And Ben, do you want to start it off?
Yeah, so I think there's only one option here for me. I'm sure you're going to have the same name on your list. I'm going with Kyle Lowry, of course. In my opinion, he's undisputed the best Raptor of all time. And was sort of the reason we almost thought of filming this video, because we thought, is he the greatest Raptor of all time? What do other people think? Is he the greatest Raptor of all time? So to me, he is. Like numbers wise, he's in the top five for pretty much every major statistic in franchise history. But some of the main ones are like first in steals, first in assists, first in 3-pointers attempted and made, second in games played, third in points, and the list just keeps going. So I think he's had a career worthy of the Hall of Fame, and I think winning that championship last year, I don't think anyone's going to wear number 7 ever again for the Raptors. I think he's going to, when he's done, they're just going to retire it. And there's no other option for me at point guard other than the GOAT. What about you?
Yeah, I had the same one, of course, Kyle Lowry. He has been with the Raptors for 8 seasons. He's, of course, made his mark as the best point guard in franchise history, especially with last year's title run. And as I mentioned, yes, he has been a part of a lot of postseason runs, which has been going on for 6 straight seasons. Of course, this would be the 7th straight if the NBA wasn't suspended. He has played around 550 games with the Raptors, which, of course, started off, like before he came to the Raptors, he started off in Memphis and then going to the Rockets. And in July of 2012, he was, of course, traded to the Raptors, which seems like a winning trade now for the franchise. And going back to the title game, from him scoring 0 points in the very first game against Orlando to Game 6 with 26 points in the NBA Finals, it's clear that he was a dominant player in helping the Raptors bring their first championship to the franchise.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, if you pick someone other than Kyle Lowry, you're doing that to try and stir up controversy. Like, there's no way any sane person could pick anyone other than Kyle Lowry for me in that position.
Yeah.
And I suspect we're going to have the same answer for this one as well. But who you got at shooting guard?
Okay, so my shooting guard is DeMar DeRozan.
Yep.
Of course, yeah. He was selected in the 2009 NBA draft, of course, and he went on to play 9 seasons with the Toronto Raptors, being a part of 5 postseason runs. And of course, one of them included the 2015-2016 season, where they made the Eastern Conference Finals and eventually losing to Cleveland in 6 games. In his career with the Raptors, though, he has had many notable 40-plus point games, one of them including his 52-point performance against the Bucks on New Year's Day in 2018. And of course, as we all know, the shocking trade that came during the summer of that same year, when DeRozan was traded to the Spurs for Kawhi Leonard. And although DeRozan didn't bring a championship to the franchise, he was still a loyal player to the team, and he did have many accomplishments in his 9-year career at the Raptors. I'm assuming you have the same player, Ben?
Yeah, I think. Another thing to note, of course, is a little bit of On The Sidelines history here. I'm pretty sure our first ever video was breaking down the Kawhi Leonard for DeMar DeRozan trade.
Yeah,
that's not why I have him on the list, but that's just something to note.
Yeah.
It is, of course, DeMar DeRozan for me too. Like for most of the categories that Kyle Lowry isn't in first place in, it is DeMar DeRozan. For example, franchise leader in games played, field goals, points, among other things. And had the Raptors not won the championship last year, we might be talking about him as the greatest Raptor of all time. But in my opinion, the title changes that and sort of promotes, I think, Lowry into that position. I think DeRozan stayed loyal for years when fans feared he might leave, like we've seen many times in Toronto over the years, as with other players who I'm sure we're going to get to in a minute. Um, but he was pretty upset when he was traded, and I think understandably so. But yeah, I said sports are a business. Raptors decided they need to get rid of him, which worked, of course. But yeah, I think like I said with Lowry's number 7, I think DeRozan may be the last player to wear number 10 in Toronto as well, because he was a special player in the city for a very long time.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, just like probably everybody, like both of us, were sad for him to leave that year. But I mean, of course, now looking back at it, it definitely paid off for the Raptors.
Yeah,
But yeah, he's definitely missed in the Raptor in Toronto, I should say, or
yeah,
with the Raptors fan base.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, so now we're gonna move on to small forward. Do you want to give yours first?
This is another. Now rounding off the top 3 players in Raptors history, as well as the
No
top 3 in
doubt.
this, as well as the top 3 on this list. I think it's got to be Kawhi Leonard, of course. It goes without saying. I think that he's probably the best player to ever put on the Raptors jersey. I wouldn't say he's the greatest in franchise history because he's only here for 1 year. But in terms of raw skill, I think he was the best player to ever come through Toronto. So I guess I'm hesitant to call him the best of all time ahead of guys like Lowry and DeRozan. But every time Leonard took the court for Toronto, they had a very good chance to win. And of course, remember when he first came to Toronto, apparently he wanted nothing to do with the city, nothing to do with the Raptors. Um, and him going back home to LA was inevitable at the end of the year as well. But he was the ultimate professional, and he delivered the team's first championship, of course. Um, Ended up enjoying his time in the city, and even said that he considered re-signing, which was surprising to me. He might have just said that, of course, but I think he meant it. So I think he had the best individual season in franchise history, capped with his second NBA Finals MVP, and I think will always be looked back on as the guy who brought the Raptors their first ever championship. So, and their greatest accomplishment as well. So I think he's not only one of the greatest Raptors of all time, but a pretty easy selection at small forward as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Of course, I had Leonard as well as my small forward. Forward. And of course, as I mentioned before, or as we mentioned before, that Leonard was traded to the Raptors in 2018 when, of course, DeMar went to the Spurs. Um, the Raptors did load manage Kawhi though a lot in
Yeah,
his one season with the Raptors. He only played 60 games during the regular season, but of course, as when the playoffs came, he had probably one of the best playoff runs as a player. Um, and in the playoffs, he had many games with 30 plus points. I can't remember the exact number right now, but he had probably 11 or 12 plus point 30-point games in the playoffs, which showed just how dominant he was as a player and in bringing the Raptors to their first championship. And although he only did play one season with the team, his impact on the franchise and of course his big playoff run puts him as the best small forward in the franchise's history.
and this is stat here from TSN that says he's responsible for 6 of the 13 highest scoring playoff games in franchise history, and
Oh,
he's
jeez.
he's yeah he's third all time in postseason scoring for the Raptors as well, despite only playing in 24 playoff games.
Only third.
He's third behind Lowry with 1240 and DeRozan with 1117, and
Oh,
he
okay.
has seven seven
Makes
hundred
sense.
and he has 732. Only playing in 24 games though, so to me that's pretty special as well, of course.
Especially in one season.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you have next? Power forward. So who do you have at power forward? This may be where we start to be a bit different for once.
Yeah, maybe. My power forward is Pascal Siakam. Um, he was drafted in 2016 with the Raptors. He did, and of course, he has played 3 full seasons with the franchise in his career. Of course, this would be the 4th season without this pandemic going on. Last season, he won the NBA's Most Improved Player award with many notable performances, especially in the NBA Finals against the Warriors. And most notably, in Game 1, he had 32 points, and then scoring 26 in the title-clinching game for the Raptors. His improvement always seems to grow with the team when he's on the court. And of course, his contract that he signed in 2019, which was 130 million for 4 years, it definitely seemed like it was the right move from Masai and for the Raptors. Do you want to mention your power forward?
Yeah, I haven't gone with Siakam actually. That's the first time we've been different in this video. I'm not gonna lie, I've kind of cheated here. Um,
Uh-oh.
yeah. Let's see. I've gone with Chris Bosh because he did play power forward in his career, but mostly played center with the Raptors. So
Yeah.
I haven't cheated a little bit here, but I put him at power forward because he's the face of the franchise for years after Vince Carter left, and for years he was the player that the Raptors built around. 7 years in Toronto before going to the Miami Heat to join probably the best trio in NBA history with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, and obviously the rest there is history. But it is important to remember that he is also started his career in Toronto and is a legend in Toronto as well. He still holds the record for blocks and both offensive and defensive rebounds, among other records. And he's one of 2 players to score 10,000 points in a Raptors uniform with DeMar DeRozan. So to me, he's one of the greatest ever to pull in the uniform, and wish I was able to watch a bit more of him in Toronto, of course.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would have put him at the power forward position if it wasn't for him starting at center for most of his
Yeah,
career. But but definitely, yeah, that is a great pick, especially just seeing how great he was with the franchise and his impact. I of course I chose Siakam because, as I just mentioned, that Chris Bosh did play center with
yeah,
the Raptors for most of his career. I think if I'm not wrong, it was only one season where he played power forward. I can't remember the
yeah.
correct stat.
I think it was one season he played more power forward than center.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but
Okay.
next up is center, and that's why I want to explain why I put Bosch at power forward. Um, the reason I put him at power forward is because I needed to find a spot in the starting lineup for this guy, who's probably my favorite Raptor of all time, but definitely up there, and that's Jonas Valanciunas. I thought I needed to get him in the starting lineup, so that's why I moved Bosch over a little bit.
Mhm.
Not only did he have the coolest name in the team's history, but he was just a beast as well on the court, of course. And unfortunately, was another player sacrificed in order to get the championship when they traded him for Marc Gasol. But he'll definitely be remembered as one of the players who helped them get to where they are and one of the sort of bridge guys in sort of building up the new Toronto Raptors. Um, I still think it's like ludicrous that they haven't given him a ring for his involvement last year. I think that's nonsense from MLSE.
Yeah.
But I think had he stayed in Toronto, I think he would have ended up near many of the top statistical categories in the Raptors uniform. And for the ones that he's not already there for example, like he's already 6th all time in games played, second to Bosch in offensive and defensive rebounds, 3rd in blocks, 7th in points. So to me, he's a Raptors legend. I think maybe people would be hesitant to give him that sort of tag as that sort of legend, but I think to me he's up there with some of the best players in franchise history. And who have you picked?
I picked Chris Bosh as my center, as I mentioned before. He was drafted in 2003 with by the Raptors. Of course, that had many notable players, including LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and also Carmelo Anthony as well. It was definitely a stacked draft. He spent 7 seasons with the Raptors and being involved in 2 playoff runs, which both resulted in first round exits in 2007 and 2008. In his 3rd season with the team, he was named an All Star, and of course, as we know, that in 2010 he left to go to the Miami Heat to join LeBron and Bosh, as we mentioned.
Wade.
And in his in his time with the Raptors, he's on the list for many different records. including points, rebounds, blocks, and minutes played. Sorry, this showed how his impact on the team was very significant, as you mentioned before, with putting him as power forward. But yeah, that's my center pick.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that pick as well, of course. Uh, so that's both of our starting lineups. Do you want to just quickly run through your starting lineup again? Just name all the players before we move on to the bench.
Sure. Yeah. So at point guard, I have Kyle Lowry. At shooting guard, I have DeMar DeRozan. At small forward, I have Kawhi Leonard. At power forward, I have Pascal Siakam. And then at center, I have Chris Bosh.
Yeah, so that's of course pretty similar to my team. Four of the five same players. I've got point guard Kyle Lowry, shooting guard DeMar DeRozan, small forward Kawhi Leonard, power forward I've got a center Chris Bosh, and at center I've gone with Jonas Valanciunas. So let's move on to the bench, I guess. Who have you got as your first bench player?
Okay, so my first bench player is Vince Carter. He was traded to the Raptors in the 1998 draft after he was drafted by the Warriors. In his time with the franchise, he has helped bring Toronto to its first playoff appearance, and of course, one of his best moments in a Raptors jersey is his 2000 NBA Slam Dunk contest, which led him to have the nickname Air Canada. And this gave fans, of course, for the Raptors something to be excited about. A dominant player like Carter was. He is third in the Raptors' all-time scoring list, which is only behind DeMar DeRozan and Chris Bosh. And although his breakup with the team wasn't really that pretty when he was traded, he will still be known as one of the great Raptor players of all time.
Yeah, I've also gone with Vince as my first bench player. I think I've justified keeping him out of the lineup, but it is undeniable. It is one of the greatest ever put on a Raptors uniform. Um, he won NBA Rookie of the Year in 1999 with the Raptors. He's still the franchise leader of points per game, 23.4, fourth all time in points. You mentioned the dunk contest, Air Canada, but I think it's the way he left Toronto that left him enemy number one in the city for a long time. Um, like for a decade, he was booed in Toronto. Has improved in recent years. Like a lot of fans even wanted Raptors to sign him to one year deal to retire in Toronto, or maybe even a 1 day contract at some point, so he retires a Raptor kind of thing. But yeah, I personally never watched him in the Raptors uniform. That's sort of before my time watching the Raptors, and probably before yours as well, I assume. So
Yeah.
maybe I just don't appreciate how good he was in Toronto, and maybe also the impact he had on the people of Toronto. But he's definitely got to be included in this team for me, and he's undeniably one of the greatest Raptors ever. I just don't think we can justify putting him above Kawhi Leonard, for example.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, he didn't bring the Raptors to a championship, but I mean, he did definitely he had a big impact on the Raptors and with fans basically. Like just everyone called him Air Canada, and of course, you did mention he was booed a lot, but yeah, that's of course we have both of the first bench player or the same player. Uh, do you want to mention your second bench player?
Yes, I mentioned my choice for second bench players who you picked um, for power forward. I've gone with Pascal Siakam. He's only been here for a few years, but I think Pascal Siakam's emerged as a superstar already in Toronto. You mentioned he was named the most improved player in the league after they won the NBA championship last year, and he was a starter at this year's All-Star game, of course, before the season was suspended. So I think he's starting to become one of the better players in the league. Definitely, probably the best player in Toronto. And I think for years to come, he'll be someone that the Raptors try to build around.
Definitely, yeah. So my second bench player is Jonas Valanciunas, as you put for your center. He started playing with the Raptors in October of 2012, being drafted fifth overall the year before. He spent almost 7 seasons with the franchise. Of course, we mentioned that he was traded the day of the NBA trade deadline in exchange for Marc Gasol. And during his time with the Raptors, he has been a part of many playoff runs, with the longest run, of course, being the 2016 Eastern Conference Finals run. Unfortunately, in that season, that he didn't play many games with the Raptors during the playoffs because he was dealing with an injury that made him miss 8 straight games. And he still made an impact during that series and with the franchise as a whole. And in regards to all-time leader in rebound percentage, he has that record at 19.2 and second in rebounds in the franchise.
Yeah, so I guess now he's caught up. We now have 7 of 7 of the same players. But who have you gone for your third bench player?
Okay, so my third bench player and my eighth, like my final player for my lineup is Damon Stoudemire.
Okay.
Um, he had only played 2.5 seasons with the Raptors, but he was the franchise's first ever pick, and he was playing the days of the Sky Dome when that existed in the first couple of years of the franchise. His rookie year was dominant as he won the NBA Rookie of the Year award in the 1995-1996 season. And of course, in that same season, he set a record for most three-point field goals made from a rookie with 133. And although the team was basically at the bottom of the Eastern Conference every single year he was with Toronto, he still was an individually talented player and one of the first big stars in the franchise's history.
I think for me, the third bench player was actually probably the hardest selection to make out of all these.
I agree,
like,
yeah.
like we had the same 7, we had the same 7 players pretty much for the slightly different order, but we had the same 7 guys before this. Um, I haven't gone with Stoudemire, so that's gonna be the only difference, I guess, between our two teams. He was one of the other players I considered, but also considered guys like Fred VanVleet, Serge Ibaka, Jose Calderon. There's so many guys
Yeah.
who came through Toronto who have been really good players. But I've gone with Amir Johnson. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, probably maybe a slightly strange pick, I guess, but he was one of the sort of bridge guys between the old terrible Raptors and the new championship winning Raptors. He's sort of one of the guys who sort of on that transitional sort of era with Lowry and DeRozan. Um, he seemed to always give his all on and off the court, which I think is obviously appreciated on any team, but especially in a city like Toronto. He played because like a lot of fans only ask for hard work. If you're not going to give them a championship, just try your best, kind of thing. And I think Johnson was sort of the epitome of that. He played 450 times for the Raptors. He's near the top of several statistical categories, of course, uh, like blocks and field goal percentage, for example. I think he's number 1 in field goal percentage. And off the court, he was really involved in the community. Like when I was researching for this video, I found an article saying that when Drake's "Nothing Was the Same" album came out, he bought every CD from 2 stores and went to Young and Dundas and just handed them out to people walking down the street, and which is something that a lot of people wouldn't do. And that's probably the most Toronto thing I've ever heard in my life too. Like a Raptors player handing out Drake CDs at Young and Dundas is like can't get more Toronto than that. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, so I think for both on and off the court, I think Amir Johnson is definitely one of the players that the Raptors look back fondly on. And yeah, he's who I've gone with at number 3 on the bench.
Yeah, no doubt that choosing a third bench player was definitely tough for, of course, both of us. We both had different players, but yeah. So that's our full lineup. And as we mentioned before, we were gonna go through our Mount Rushmore of Raptors
Yeah,
players, of course, 4 of the best players in the franchise. Do you want to mention your Mount Rushmore?
yeah. Again, same with a lot of the lineup. I think we'll probably have the same thing or maybe similar. I've gone with Kyle Lowry, of course, DeMar DeRozan, Kawhi Leonard, and Vince Carter.
I I have the same 4 players as you.
Yeah,
Well, of
that's not
course,
too
there's no
surprising.
doubt. Of course, there's no doubt that those 4 players accomplished so much with the Raptors, and yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. It's undoubtedly those 4 players for sure.
yeah. I think Chris. You give a case for Chris Bosh as well, of course. I think if Mount Rushmore had 5 heads on it, I think Chris Bosh should be a pretty standard 5th pick. But I think it has to be those 4 if you're looking at not only what they meant on the court, but off the court and sort of the impact they had on Toronto. I think it has to be the 4 players we just named.
I was also going to mention that maybe when we look back at this like 5, 10 years from now, I was thinking like maybe we can make a case for Siakam, depending
Yeah,
on how he develops in the upcoming seasons. With hopefully he stays with the Raptors for a long time, depending on of course his contract details and all that stuff. But yeah, hopefully we might consider him as as a Mount Rushmore player in the years to come.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if he stays for as long as someone like Kyle Lowry has stayed, for example, I think he said 8 seasons. If he stays for anywhere near that long and keeps putting up the numbers that he's doing now, and he's already won the championship, and maybe can bring another one, I think it's inevitable that one day, if he stays in Toronto, I think he will end up on a list like that eventually.
Definitely, yeah.
And he just signed a long-term deal as well, so hopefully honors that deal and stays in Toronto for many years to come.
Yeah, for sure. His 4-year contract, as I mentioned. But yeah, hopefully, like you said, he'll be as dominant as he is in his first 4 seasons with the Raptors.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's pretty much all we've got for this video. Do you have anything else to add?
Uh, no, I think my full lineup is good. And yeah, do you have anything else to add?
Not really, but I think uh, over the next week you can expect to see some more videos here on the sidelines. I think on probably Monday we're going to be doing Off the Sidelines episode 4. Go check out episode 3 if you haven't yet, and episode 1 and 2, of course. Last week we talked a lot about the NFL draft, as well as about the Red Sox punishment, and we picked the best MLB team over the last decade. So if you haven't watched that video yet, go check that out. On Monday, we're hoping to do episode 4 of that, and next Thursday as well, we'll try and do Throwback Thursday episode 2, which looks like we're going to be doing Leafs players, Toronto Maple Leafs players, since the start of the 2010-2011 season. So yeah, looking forward to that video, Matthew.
Definitely, yeah. We'll see how our lineups end up. Like, I mean, maybe they might be closer, but who knows? Especially in a
Yeah,
10-year
I,
tenure.
I suspect there'll be a lot of similarities. Again, I think there's a couple of names which are going to be making a lot of sense. I think, um, but yeah, I think it might be a bit different compared to this one. Was pretty straightforward. But I think the Leafs have had a lot of good players over the years, and maybe mix it up a bit more. Yeah,
Definitely.
that's all we have for Throwback Thursday, episode 1. Let us know if you agree or disagree with any of our picks, of course. And yeah, thanks for watching.
Thank you, guys.